Hey folks, I want to talk about 2Kings chapter 5 verses 1 through 19. And folks are probably going, whoa, what's this guy off on? That's the Old Testament. That was like, 2,500, 3,000 plus years ago. Well, actually, the story we're interested in today is probably about 2,700 years ago. And it's the story of a fellow named Naaman and how he was healed from leprosy. And what's cool about this story is all the human factors that go on back then. And a lot of those factors transcend a lot of time and space, places, the whole deal. Probably another 1,000 years from now, we'll still be running into the same issues. And one of the big things that goes on is the topic of indignation. And specifically, Jesus, when he was preaching in the synagogue in Luke chapter 4, he says, hey, the prophet's not welcome in his hometown. Well, then, that kind of got people a little bit riled up, and even more so, then he goes and brings up the story of Naaman being healed from leprosy. Now, the deal with this is Naaman was from Aram and not from Israel. He was the guy that got healed. The people in Israel, they didn't. They were left out in the cold. Now, the folks in the synagogue, they knew this. I mean, the scriptures have been around for 700 plus years, or the stories, they verbally passed these things down, and certainly there are things on the scrolls. And that's been around, and they were very familiar with it. Now Jesus says, prophet's not welcome. I'm going to bring up this story that's going to aggravate you to no end. And of course, what happens? People had a bird. They ran Jesus out of the synagogue, went to get him, run him out of town. They even wanted to throw him over a cliff. That's like having a bird of the seventh power or something. Anyhow, let's go and roll on 2 Kings chapter 5 verses 1 through 19. I've got the wrong graphic up on the screen, so of course that's par for the course. That happens. Specifically here, since we'll talk about that a little bit, what we've got going on, you can see my mouse pointer. This is Jerusalem down here, and up here this is Samaria. And right around in this region, we'll get to it a little bit later, and that's where the king of Israel was hanging out at. I believe they were talking about Gilgal, but it's not really defined exactly where it is. And then, of course, over here, this is the River Jordan. That plays a big role. And we can back up a little bit. This is Damascus, and Damascus is in Aram. That's another key point in this whole story. I just bring that up to kind of show you some of the distances involved. It's kind of a long haul from Damascus to go see the king of Israel. But if you go to Samaria to the Jordan River, it's not quite, nowhere near as far. So it just gives you an idea as far as the poor guys had to go and travel over these mountains, and it was not easy to get around. They didn't have all the roads that are there like they have today. We're going to get back and start at the beginning here. Naaman was the commander of the army of the king of Aram. He'd won a number of battles and such, and he was highly regarded and a valiant soldier, but he had a big problem, namely that he had leprosy. Now, to throw a little bit of a wrench into things, when they were having these wars and such, there were raiders and other guys running around, and they went over and kidnapped a young girl out of Israel, and she ended up becoming Naaman's wife's servant. So here you got this young girl. Some places say that she is 6 years old. She goes and says to her mistress, Naaman's wife, if only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. And I'm going, okay. So we got a 6-year-old, and she's been kidnapped. So do we have a Stockholm Syndrome thing going on, or what's the deal? I guess, we don't know. But then the other question you got to ask is, here you got this big-time warrior, Naaman, and he's going to listen to a 6-year-old? Well, not only did he listen to her, he went to his master and told him the story. Now, his master was the king of Aram. We're not talking small stuff here. This 6-year-old has this massive influence. The king said, hey, I tell you what, let's go and do it. So he said, I'll send a letter to the king of Israel. So Naaman left the king, and that's where we go back to the map here, and we can see that he was with the king over in Damascus. And then he went and traveled over to where the king of Israel is, which is somewhere here west of the river Jordan. He took this letter from the king of Aram to the king of Israel. And the letter said, "With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. It's not what the 6-year-old girl said, but it's pretty cool, king to king. So Naaman finally gets over to see the king of Israel, and he's not too pleased at all. He tore his robes and he said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me." And he tore his robes, and it's like, wow, go and tear your robe over a letter, but hey, we got, if you ever saw the movie Romancing the Stone, you got Michael Douglas loses all his birds, so he takes his shotgun and just starts shooting in the air out of frustration. So I guess, we're not that different. We don't tear clothes, we shoot shotguns in the air. When he did that with the robe thing, Elisha came and heard about this. And now Elisha's hanging out up in Samaria. Word traveled. And he heard this, and he said to the king of Israel and sent him a message, "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there's a prophet in Israel." Naaman went with his horses and chariots, and he cruised over to Elisha's house. Now, Elijah's kind of a goofy guy, because he's just hanging out in his house, as you see here. He's just hanging out inside there. He doesn't even open the door. He sends a messenger out to see this Naaman guy. So here you got this big wheel hotshot military guy, and Elisha says, "Come to me," but no, I'm not going to come on. I'm just going to send my messenger to you. And the messenger told this military hotshot, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh shall be restored, and you will be cleansed." Now, Naaman flipped out on that, and I show that he's spinning around here on this interesting graphic. He said, "I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" So he turned and went off in a rage. Well, some cooler heads kind of prevailed. I guess being a good leader, you want to have some good folks along with you. And they said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed?" So Naaman went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times as the man of God had told him. And his flesh was restored, and he became clean like that of a young boy. So then Naaman and all his attendants went back to Elisha. And he stood before him and said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept the gift from your servant." Well, obviously, we'd be thinking the same thing. I mean, we got these TV healer guys going left and right. "Send me the money, and we'll heal you," or whatever. But Elisha's kind of a radical dude. He said, "As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept a thing." And even though Naaman urged him, he refused. And it's like, wow. And this is all going down in Samaria here, not all that far from the Jordan River. But Naaman said, "If you will not, please let me, your servant, be given as much earth as a pair of mules can carry, for your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifices to any other god but the Lord. But may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. When my master enters the temple of Rimmon to bow down, and he is leaning on my arm, and I have to bow there also. When I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord forgive your servant for this." "Go in peace," Elisha said.